Undercover SEAL was sitting in his diner when a waitress whispered, "Act normal. They're following you." The rain hammered against the cracked windows of Murphy's all-night diner like angry fists demanding entry. Marcus Thornfield pulled his worn baseball cap lower over his eyes and hunched deeper into the torn vinyl booth, the kind that had seen better decades. The fluorescent lights above flickered with the persistence of a dying heartbeat, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. A face that belonged to a man worth $3 billion, though no one in this forgotten corner of Interstate 79 would ever guess it. He'd been driving for 18 hours straight, fleeing the suffocating glass towers of Manhattan, where every handshake felt like a potential knife in the back. The board meeting was in 3 days, and he needed to think, really think, away from the vultures circling his empire. Thornfield Industries had been his life's work, built from nothing but determination and a borrowed $10,000. Now at 52, he found himself questioning everything and everyone around him. The coffee in his chipped mug had long since gone cold, but he cradled it anyway, finding comfort in its warmth against his callous palms. His flannel shirt bought at a gas station 2 states back smelled of diesel fuel and desperation. For the first time in decades, Marcus felt invisible, and he liked it. More coffee, Han. The voice belonged to a waitress who couldn't have been older than 25, with tired eyes that spoke of double shifts and unpaid bills. Her name tag read, Sarah, and she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd mastered the art of being everywhere at once. Marcus had watched her for the past hour, serving truckers and late-night wanderers with the same patient smile that never quite reached those weary eyes. "Sure. Thanks," he mumbled, pushing the cup toward her. His voice, naturally commanding boardrooms and striking fear into competitors' hearts, came out rough and subdued. Sarah began pouring, her hands steady, despite the slight tremor he noticed in her fingers. The diner was nearly empty now, just an old trucker nursing his third piece of apple pie in the corner booth, and a young couple whispering sweet promises they'd probably forget by morning. The silence stretched like taffy, broken only by the persistent drumming of rain and the soft jazz crackling from an ancient radio behind the counter. That's when Sarah leaned in. Her movement was so natural, so casual that anyone watching would have assumed she was simply being attentive to a customer, but her words whispered so softly they barely disturbed the air between them, sent ice through Marcus' veins. "Act normal. They're following you." The coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Every instinct screamed at him to whip around, to scan the room, to demand answers. But something in Sarah's tone, urgent yet controlled, kept him perfectly still. His fingers tightened around the ceramic handle, knuckles white with tension, but his expression remained out of a tired traveler, grateful for warm coffee on a cold night. Sarah straightened, her professional smile sliding back into place as if nothing had happened. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, a gesture so innocent it was almost mocking given what she just revealed. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked in her normal voice, loud enough for anyone to hear. But her eyes, those tired, knowing eyes, held his for just a moment longer than necessary. In that brief connection, Marcus saw something that chilled him more than her warning. Genuine fear. His mind raced through possibilities like a computer processing data. Corporate espionage wasn't uncommon in his world. Thornfield Industries had plenty of enemies who'd love to see him stumble. But how had they found him here in this middle of nowhere diner dressed like any other ordo-weary traveler? He'd paid cash for everything, left his phone in the hotel room 2 states back and chosen this route specifically because it was random, spontaneous. "No. I'm good," he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "Just passing through." Sarah nodded and moved away, but not before slipping something under his napkin. The motion was so smooth, so practiced that Marcus wondered if this waitress had done this before. His pulse hammered in his throat as he fought every instinct to grab whatever she'd left him. Instead, he lifted his coffee cup and took a slow sip, letting his eyes drift around the diner with the lazy disinterest of a man with nowhere to go and nothing to hide. The old trucker was counting out exact change for his bill, mumbling about gas prices. The young couple had moved on to sharing a milkshake, lost in their own little world. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even. But now Marcus' senses were hyperactive, attuned to every detail. The way the kitchen door swung just slightly, as if someone had been listening from behind it, the soft creak of floorboards from the restroom area where no one had gone. The almost imperceptible change in Sarah's posture as she wiped down the counter. Her shoulders tense, her movements just a fraction too quick. He built an empire by trusting his instincts. And those same instincts now screamed danger. Someone was watching him. Someone who would manage to track him to this forgotten slice of Americana despite all his precautions. The question wasn't just who, it was how many and what they wanted. Marcus reached for his napkin ostensibly to wipe his mouth and felt the small piece of paper Sarah had left. Without looking at it, he palmed it and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Whatever message she'd risked everything to pass him would have to wait. Right now, he needed to stay in character. Just another nobody stopping for coffee on a rainy night. But as he sat there sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending to read yesterday's newspaper someone had left behind, one thought kept circling through his mind like a predator stalking its prey. If they'd found him here in the middle of nowhere without any electronic trail to follow, then whoever was hunting him had resources and determination that went far beyond typical corporate espionage. This was personal. Marcus forced himself to turn the newspaper page with the casual indifference of a man reading about weather patterns in distant cities. But his reflection in the Rain Street window told a different story. Behind the ghostly image of his own face, he could see them clearly now. Two figures standing beneath the broken street light across the parking lot. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. The first man was tall and lean, wearing a dark coat that looked expensive even from this distance. He held a cigarette between his fingers, but Marcus noticed he never actually brought it to his lips. The orange ember glowed steadily, untouched while rain beaded on his shoulders. His companion was shorter, stockier, with the kind of build that suggested he'd spent years in gymnasiums rather than boardrooms. Both men had positioned themselves perfectly, close enough to watch every person entering or leaving the diner, far enough away to avoid the flickering neon sign's harsh light. What made Marcus's blood run cold wasn't their presence. It was their patience. These weren't opportunistic corporate spies or private investigators hoping to catch him in some compromising position. These men had the stillness of professionals, the kind who could wait in the rain for hours without shifting their weight or checking their watches. He lifted his coffee cup to his lips, using the motion to steal another glance. The tall one's head turned slightly, following a pickup truck as it pulled out of the lot. His gaze swept across the diner's windows, and for a heart-stopping moment, Marcus felt those eyes lock onto his reflection. But the man's expression never changed. Just a blank patient stare of someone doing a job. Refill. Sarah appeared beside his table again, coffee pot in hand. She didn't look toward the window, but her voice carried an undertone of urgency that made Marcus's skin crawl. Please. He held out his cup, noting how her hand trembled slightly as she poured. Quiet night gets busier around midnight, she replied. The words carefully neutral. Then so quietly he almost missed it. They've been out there for 20 minutes. Showed up right after you ordered dessert. 20 minutes. That meant they'd been watching him eat his pie, watching him read the paper, watching him pretend to be just another traveler killing time. The thought made his stomach clench with a mixture of anger and fear he hadn't felt since his early days building the company, when every contract could make or break him. You expecting company? Sarah asked, still in that carefully casual tone. Not the kind I'd want, he murmured back. She nodded and moved away, but not before he caught the worry lines creasing her forehead. Whatever she knew about these men, it was enough to scare her, and she struck him as someone who didn't scare easily. Marcus returned to his paper, but his mind was racing through options. The diner had two exits. The front door, which would take him directly past his watchers, and a back door near the restrooms that probably led to the alley behind the building. His rental car sat in the front lot, keys in his jacket pocket. But getting to it meant walking into their line of sight. Even if he made it to the car, they'd follow him onto the highway. And he had no idea if there were more of them waiting down the road. Through the reflection, he watched the shorter man pull out a phone. The conversation was brief, just a few words and a nod. When he hung up, both men shifted slightly, like dogs receiving a new scent. Whatever instructions they'd received had changed something. That's when Marcus noticed the third shadow. It was subtle, just a darker patch in the alley between the diner and the abandoned gas station next door, but it moved with the same calculated stillness as the men in the street. 3 that he could see, probably more that he couldn't. These weren't corporate spies hoping to catch him in a scandal. This level of coordination, this many resources dedicated to tracking one man through the middle of nowhere. This was something else entirely.
His fingers found the piece of paper Sarah had slipped him still folded in his pocket. Whatever message she'd risked passing him might hold answers, but he couldn't read it here, not with hostile eyes tracking his every movement. The old trucker finished his coffee and shuffled toward the front door, keys jingling in his weathered hand. As he pushed outside, Marcus watched the watcher's reaction. The tall man's head turned, following the trucker's progress across the lot to his rig. They were cataloging everyone, not just him. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They weren't just watching, they were waiting for him to be alone. Sarah appeared at the young couple's table, chatting with forced brightness as she cleared their plates. But her eyes kept darting toward the window, toward the shadows that held so much menace. When the couple finally left, laughing and running through the rain to their car, Marcus felt the walls of the diner closing in around him. Now it was just him, Sarah, and whatever game these watchers were playing. His reflection in the window looked back at him. A middle-aged man in flannel and denim, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. But behind that ordinary face, the mind that had built a business empire from nothing was already working, calculating risks and probabilities, searching for the move that would keep him alive long enough to find out who wanted him dead. Sarah's hands shook as she wiped down the same spot on the counter for the 5th time. The rag moved in small, obsessive circles, wearing away at a stain that had disappeared minutes ago. She could feel Marcus watching her from his booth, could sense the questions burning behind his careful facade, and the weight of what she'd done pressed down on her chest like a stone. 3 weeks ago, she'd been just another struggling college student working double shifts to pay for textbooks and ramen noodles. Her biggest worry had been passing organic chemistry, not orchestrating the downfall of one of the most powerful men in America. But then he'd walked into her life. Not Marcus, but the other one. The one who looked just enough like him to make her heart skip when she'd first seen him in the parking lot after her shift. Daniel Thornfield had been nothing like she'd expected a billionaire's brother to be. Where she'd imagined arrogance, she'd found charm. Where she'd expected coldness, she'd discovered a man who seemed genuinely interested in her stories about late-night customers and her dreams of becoming a nurse. He listened when she talked about her sick mother, nodding with what seemed like real sympathy when she explained why she dropped out of college to work full-time. "I need your help," he'd said over coffee at the truck stop down the highway. His blue eyes, so similar to the ones now watching her from across the diner, had been warm with what she thought was affection. "My brother, he's not well. He's been making dangerous decisions, and the company board is worried. We just need to keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself or anyone else." The lie had been so smooth, so perfectly crafted that Sarah had never questioned it. $2,000 just for watching, he'd said. Just for being friendly if Marcus ever happened to stop by her diner. Nothing harmful, just observant. He might not look like much when you see him, Daniel had warned, sliding a photograph across the sticky table. He's been going through a rough patch, dressing down, trying to be invisible. But he's still my brother, and I love him. Love. That word had sealed her participation more than the money ever could. Sarah had grown up watching her own brothers look out for each other. Had seen the fierce loyalty that could exist between siblings. When Daniel asked her to help protect his troubled brother, she'd seen it as something noble, something caring. Now watching Marcus sit hunched over his coffee cup while predators circled in the darkness outside, she felt sick with the realization of what she'd really agreed to do. The man in the booth wasn't unstable or dangerous. He was terrified. She could see it in the careful way he held his newspaper, and the measured sips of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, in the rigid set of his shoulders as he pretended not to notice the watchers outside. This wasn't a man who needed protection from his own poor judgment. This was a man who needed protection from his own family. Her phone buzzed against her hip. Daniel's number flashed on the screen, and Sarah's stomach clenched. She'd been texting him updates for the past hour when Marcus arrived, what he ordered, how long he'd been sitting there. Innocent information that now felt like coordinates for a missile strike. The text was brief. "Good work. Stay close. This ends tonight." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "This ends tonight." Not, "He'll be safe tonight," or "We'll talk to him tonight." "This ends tonight." She glanced toward Marcus, saw him checking his watch with the careful nonchalance of someone trying not to appear nervous. He had no idea that every detail of his evening had been reported, catalogued, and transmitted to people who meant him harm. He trusted her, not completely, but enough to stay here, to drink her coffee, to hope that the scared young woman who had whispered a warning might be on his side. The worst part was that she'd started to like him. In the hour he'd been here, she'd watched him leave extra bills under his plate for the bus, had seen him nod politely to the other customers, had noticed how he said please and thank you, as if her service actually mattered to him. He treated her like a person, not like furniture or a means to an end. Unlike his brother who made her feel special right up until the moment she'd outlived her usefulness. Another text arrived. Are the others in position? Others. Sarah's chest tightened.